Yes, geezers, what's going on? Specie here. I've got a new camera. You might be able to tell the difference in quality. It's pretty drastic, pretty lovely, and we've got the patch notes, the patch coming out tomorrow. Make sure you subscribe for all of the best Gwent content for patch day, and here we are. Also, follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Specimen, where I will be streaming on patch day. I stream every day at 3:30 p.m. GMT. Alright, let's dive into the patch notes. I've already looked through them, but there's going to be a few that I've kind of forgotten. We haven't found out the new journey yet. I did predict about a month ago it was going to be Dandelion, because we haven't had Dandelion yet, so let's have to wait and see. And obviously it is a love event as well. So patch 10.2 is here. This update is going to be pretty eventful, wink wink, so we're going to get some sort of love event, which again, Dandelion, Priscilla, you know, it would make a lot of sense with a new journey coming out. This time a series of challenges will await you, aiming at reuniting some of Gwent's most known couples. That is not the only treat for this month, as our new journey is starting tomorrow. And then yeah, there's a big balance patch. There's a video if you want to watch it, it's in the description below. So there's a new journey, there's a new love event where we're going to be reuniting and receiving unique cosmetics. Take part in challenges to help out Ice Calanth, mate. Guys, Calanth is my favourite. Philippe and Dijkstra. Finishing each quest grants a reward. While completing all of them will grant the player a unique skin for Queen Calanth. Okay, I haven't actually read this part. I've only read the balance changes, so I'm pretty excited for that. Queen Calanth, a lot of you guys will know, pincer maneuver, she used to be like that leader, but it was always my favourite when Homecoming first came out, so I'm excited for that. There's a new reward tree for Syndicate and a new coin highlight that reminds players to end their turn changes. The initiative keyword also includes fee and spring. So this is something I was aware of, the Syndicate fees, you could technically combo with Scorch. I did avoid doing that because I knew it was a bug and I didn't want to go near it, but yeah, I'm happy to see we can now play Scorch Syndicate, because it does kind of make a lot of sense. I did post a Scorch Syndicate deck about a month ago, and I'm going to look at doing another one of those pretty soon. That should be pretty exciting. Alright, we've got Viggo's Muzzle as a neutral change, which is absolutely huge. It is got a double buff. Its provisions has gone from 11 to 10, and its seize is now 6. So instead of being 10 tempo, seizing a 5 and getting it yourself, it's now going to be a 12 tempo play, and it's only 10 provisions. So this is going to be a really, really popular card, I would say. Viggo's Muzzle used to be super popular way back when, and it is just returned to being as good as it probably used to be. Now, Viggo's Muzzle does lock, but if you can seize a veiled card, obviously you can't lock a veil, so this is going to be really good on things like, not practitioners, the mage torturers from Nilfgaard, which have a veil and also some sort of engine. It's going to be good against things like Freak Show. While it's going to lock it, it's just going to be a nice answer to it. With the Jackpot passive, it can get up to 6, despite having that one armor. That armor's not going to be relevant. I would expect this card to be really popular. Honestly, I used to hate Viggo's Muzzle back in the day. I've always been quite scared of the seize thing, but I quite like this, I have to say, like just giving neutral decks that extra little bit of control. It's like another reason to go non-devotion in decks like Pirates, for example. I could see making use of cards like this. Any kind of control deck. Obviously, it's going to be a spell card as well, so it does work with Alza. It does work with Gord, you know, as being special in that sense. Francesca as well, you could double Muzzle because Francesca got a big buff, so very excited to try this one out. For sure, this is going to be one of the biggest changes from this. Is there any particular decks you guys think you're going to use your Muzzle in? Again, does break devotion, so non-devotion control type decks. Does compete with Heatwave at like 10 provisions, but there's no reason you can't play both a Heatwave and a Muzzle. Gedineth is 14 provisions. I'm really happy to see this change. Just Geddy getting nerfed ever since Preachers went down to 4 provisions, but particularly since Mushy Truffle got printed, Geddy's been really good. I would, however, probably like to see more like Dwim Vendra's Mushy Truffle, like all that kind of synergy with Gedineth getting nerfed rather than Geddy itself, but this does go, of course, some way of nerfing that deck. I just think that the point slam of Dwim Vendra's Mushy Truffle with Preachers is a little excessive, I must admit, but happy to see Geddy get nerfed either way. We've got some other big changes though to Skellige. It's one of the ones that's got a whole bunch of changes, and some of these I'm really interested in particular because it's promoting the self-wound archetype. You guys all know that Ceres Fearless is a card I absolutely adore, using the Ursine Ritual leader ability, but Ursine just doesn't feel all that strong despite having Ceres Fearless. Like cards like the vanilla Ceres feel a little bit weak. The leader itself just doesn't feel fantastic, but the deck feels great. It just feels like it's very, very close. So let's see if these changes are going to be enough to push it over the edge into being a real competitive option. Already in Skellige, you've got Devotion Pirates, non-Devotion Pirates, you've got Warriors, you've got Gedineth, some sort of Flurry decks. Like, there's so many decks I've even forgotten some, even still, that are like very, very competitive. Rain, you know, there's all sorts. Skellige, if you can add this self-damage, will be definitely the most diverse faction, if not so already. So excited to see this. Anyway, Knut, or Nut as I like to call him, his ability has changed to Zeal Order before he was a deploy. Damage an allied unit by half its current power, then damage an enemy unit by the same amount. Okay, so Nut has Berserk 5 at the end of your turn, refresh this ability. So you can basically use this guy's previously deploy multiple times. So obviously deploy as well, it was very limited in where it would go. If you wanted to put it next to the Draco Turtle, for example, it would stop the priest pinging it every turn, just as a quick example. So having the order is already worth a few points, but then the fact that if you can give it Berserk, you can refresh its ability at the end of a turn is pretty damn significant, because you could get it down to Berserk 5 with a leader charge. It is a 6 power card, I do believe, so you could get it done with a leader charge from Ursine, with a priest, with a Melusine, something like that, right? And then get to use it again, so it becomes an engine. So this card's buff is absolutely insane. I really am excited to use this card in the Ursine decks, for sure. Restore's also gone down to 5 provisions. Restore has some potentially really cool combos with Ceres Fearless, with cards like Melusine. Oh! That's not ideal, is it? I'm not restarting. I'm just going to have to continue, mate. I'm not restarting. I ain't got time. I need to stream. So, love to see Restore at 5 provisions. 6 provisions, it just didn't really feel like a realistic option. But as soon as a card is 5 provisions and it's a gold, like, it does become a lot more tempting just to pay 1 provision for that opportunity cost that Restore can potentially give you. There's also some really fun things you can do with this card with Idaran, where if you like Idaran Patricidal Fury, you get Arnulf down at 1 point, and then you could use Restore on it, and it's going to play for, I think, 20 points or so, something like that. So excited to see Restore at 5 provisions, definitely. Siegfeld is now 7 power, and provision cost is 7 as well. And its ability has changed to... What the hell does Siegfeld even bloody do? I don't even know what a Siegfeld is. Let's just take a quick bloody look, shall we? What is a Siegfeld when it's at home? So, Siegfeld is the guy that's currently Berserk doing damage, and his ability is now changed. So he's now 7 for 7, and he is now, whenever this unit is damaged by other abilities, gain bleeding for the same duration instead. Okay, so if you were to bleed this, for example, or damage this rather with a priest, and then you'd have Melusine on the other side, rather than it taking 2 damage, it would gain 2 bleeding. So obviously if you can stack a bunch of bleeding, let's say like get 10 bleeding onto this card, that's not ever going to actually, you know, that 10 bleeding isn't going to come into fruition, because, you know, bleeding is only once per turn. So that's pretty interesting, and you could purify potentially as well, to negate that. So it's like a sponge, essentially, a sponge for damage, for self-damage. But its order is damage unit by the duration of bleeding on self, then purify self. If it was an enemy, damage self by the same amount. If it was an ally, boost self by the same amount. Okay, so let's first deal with this if you are dealing to an enemy. Let's say you get 5 bleeding on this from just having a priest on it for 5 turns. Well, it would need to be more than 5 turns because it's going to... But anyway, you damage it by 5. It's got 5 bleedings. 5 bleeding. Use the order. You damage a unit by 5 and the purify self. So you're going to lose the bleeding first and foremost. If it was an enemy, however, it does damage by the same amount, so you might get to remove something, but then you damage it, sort of like a Cyclops effect, right? Which is pretty interesting, but it doesn't... Let's say you have 13 bleeding and you only deal 1 damage, then it would only damage itself by 1, so it's much better than a Cyclops because you can't overkill. But then if you damage an ally, it boosts self, so you turn the bleeding into boost. You could damage a 1 strength Harold's Pal, for example. You could damage something like a veteran. There's all sorts of things you can do to combo this card. It is only a one-time use order, but I'm really excited to see how Siegfeld is played. Basically just put a bunch of damage into it with cards like Priest, cards like Melusine, leader charges, perhaps even Harold as well, Harold Houndsnout himself. Then you could either use it as removal or just as a big boost card. Really excited to see both these 2 changes. Restore as well, but particularly the Newton Siegfeld. Just 2 pretty bad cards that are now looking very, very hot indeed. I do like the Restore change too. The On-Crate Warrior as well has got a point. I believe this is the 4 provision geezer. So this is a card that you can play with warriors. It combines well with the 6 provision Clash of Clans called War of Clans is its actual name. So that's just got an extra point. And yeah, the Devotion Warriors deck, which can res this, has also got an extra point, because the War of Clans card, if you guys aren't familiar with it, let me just pull up what War of Clans does. Devotion is the only real deck this card is used in, but you damage an enemy unit by 2, and then you get to play a 4 provision card, 4 provision warrior from your graveyard. So 5 removal, and you get an extra point now with this on-crate warrior getting a point. It hadn't seen any play recently, so it's just a nice little change. Not a huge change though, to be completely honest. And then finally for Skellige, we have the Axeman, which is a bit of an iconic Gwent card. It used to work how Greatswords worked, but it was uncapped back in beta. So at the moment, it's destroying an enemy unit with half or less than half of its base power. Right now, though, it's changed to damage a unit by how much it's already damaged. So definitely a buff. Before, it would destroy an enemy unit with half its or less than its base power. So if you've got a 4 strength unit, or your opponent's got a 4 strength unit rather, that's damaged down to 2, you would just be able to remove it. Whereas now, if it's 3 strength, you would just be able to damage it by 1. So it's definitely a buff. It just doesn't brick as often. It's just going to be able to play for value a fair little bit. And it is a 4 body as well. So all you really need to do is have a card damaged by 3, and it's going to kind of be worth it. Like imagine your opponent has a 7 strength unit damaged by 3. Your Axeman is now going to be able to deal 3 damage to it, whereas before it wouldn't do anything. And similarly, if it's damaged by 4, it will just destroy it just like it would otherwise. So pretty cool. I guess like it's worse against cards with armor. That is one thing to consider. But how often do you see damaged cards with armor? Not very often at all. So yeah, definitely a buff for this one. Now, Northern Realms, big changes. Now, Northern Realms, I think a lot of these changes have the potential to be a little bit OP. Definitely one of the decks that I think most people are going to be excited about because it's a big buff to the resupply, the siege weapon, that kind of archetype. So the first change is the biggest. And that is that Resupply has had its ability changed to, whenever you play a Warfare card, reduce this card's cooldown by 1. So right now, Resupply has a slightly different... Let's see if we can find out exactly what Resupply does. We actually can't on here, can we? What it currently does. But anyway, I don't even think. Basically, Keldar, right? It's when you play a... Yeah, Resupply is whenever you play a Warfare card, it just has a certain ability. So for Keldar, it's spawn a Witcher student on this row. Whereas now, the Resupply is whenever you play a Warfare card, reduce this card's cooldown by 1. So Keldar's not the kind of card that's going to have Resupply anymore. But for example, Odrin does. So Odrin now with Resupply, unless this card has changed its ability. Okay, bad example. Basically, Resupply is working like how... the Resupply always worked here. Okay, Resupply now is just going to be reducing the cooldown. So loads of the cards that currently have Resupply will lose the Resupply and get a change in their ability. And cards like Reinforced Ballista that already had Resupply will just have it. Now Resupply, rather than saying reduce the cooldown by 1, that's what Resupply is just going to do all across the board. Okay, I kind of made that a little bit more complicated than it needed to be, but all you need to know is if a card's got Resupply and you play a Warfare card, let's just pull all those cards up. You've got things like Amphibious Assault, anything John Natalis can play. In fact, Commander's Horn is one as well. Reinforcements, Boiling Ore, Bombardment, Target Practice, Winch as well being the most important ones. So whenever you play a Warfare card, reduces cards cooldown by 1. Foltest Pride, let's look at that first. So I guess we can just type in Siege because a lot of these are going to be in there. Foltest Pride has now got Resupply, which is pretty ridiculous. Like if you ever play a Warfare card, such as a Winch, it's going to reduce its cooldown by 1. So Winch previously reduces the cooldown by 3, but it's now going to reduce the cooldown on Foltest Pride by 4. So if you don't even have a crew pocket, you could Winch straight away. You could use this, click it, Winch it, use it again. Pretty insane. Big buff to Foltest Pride for sure. Keldar has now basically lost the Resupply tag, and it's just saying whenever you play a special card, spawn a Witcher student on this row. So it's actually a buff to Keldar overall as well, because you could use something like a Heat Wave or an Iromancy, and it's actually going to trigger him rather than just the Resupply cards or the Warfare cards like Amphibious Assault. So definitely a buff to Keldar, but also like a little bit of a risk. You might fill your board a little bit sooner than you might want to, but it's certainly a big buff. Maybe not a big buff, but a buff to Keldar if you're to be using cards like Selective Mutations, for example, will give you an extra student, all those types of things. So Keldar's got a buff as well. Now, Odrin has got a provision change to 5 provisions, another gold 5 provision card, and his ability has changed completely, and he is now a one-man crew, which is really damn cool. So Odrin, if you have got a Foltest Pride next to it, for example, you don't need a soldier either side, same with the War Elephant, you just need Odrin. Now, that's going to be able to facilitate 2 of your cards which have crew abilities. So War Elephant, Foltest Pride, you can have War Elephant to the left, Foltest Pride to the right, and you don't need to worry about any other soldiers. Odrin has you covered. He is just a one-man band, a one-man crew pocket, which is really damn cool. Coming in at 5 provisions, and I do believe he's 6 power as well, so pretty difficult to remove. Odrin, one of the best premiums in the game as well, so excited to see Odrin back. This one-man crew ability is very, very, very cool indeed. Trollolololol, another fan favourite from back in the day. His armor's changed. Let's just take a quick look at what Trollolol is currently doing. This card is pretty insane, in my opinion. Let's see if we can find him. Here he is. Here he is. At the moment, he is got a resupply of gaining armor, but again, we know resupply is changing. And now he's lost his armor, so he's still 5 power, 7 provisions by the looks of things. Yep, so 5 power, 7 provisions with 0 armor. And its ability has changed to Zeal Order, lose all armor, then boost self by that amount. So you're giving Trollololololololol a bunch of armor, and it's basically like a gourd. But how does it get armor? Well, whenever an allied unit uses its order, gain 1 armor. Bruh, that's insane. So this is going to be if this card is in your deck, if it's in your hand, in your graveyard, I'm not sure, but I don't think that's necessarily important. But yeah, this card's insane. So every order you use is giving Trollolol a point of boost as a finisher. So I know Gord got capped at 15 points. I would definitely expect Trollolol to be more than 15 points. I was speaking to Paya just now, and he said you could use Trollolol with Arbalist, for example, any high-end order abilities. But let's not forget this resupply got buffed as well. So you've got Foltest Pride with resupply, which means it's reducing its cooldown every time you use a warfare card. You've got Rathard's Vengeance as well, which you can click, you can give Zeal. You've got Spellweavers, you've got whatever it might be with a bunch of pings. All of those are going to count towards every time you ping a Spellweaver, for example, that is a point on Trollolol for the end of the game. So this deck has just got a big finisher, and it's not just a big finisher, it's a pretty insane finisher. Probably looking at like 20 plus points for 7 provisions. Seems probably too good, is my honest opinion. We'll have to wait and see. It's very, very difficult to evaluate how good this will be, but I would imagine that this card gets nerfed probably down the line. I would not be surprised. I think this card just seems quite insane, but I'm excited to play it anyway. Hopefully it's not too much, and hopefully it is balanced, but I'm a little bit worried that it might be too much. We'll see. War Chariot has also been given resupply. So War Chariot is the siege engine, which can be used in the front or the back to give bleeding or to move. It's now got resupply, so its cooldown's getting reduced every time you play a warfare card. Battering Ram has had an ability change as well. It's got resupply now. I think that's all. Yeah, so it's now got resupply on the Battering Ram. That's the only difference there. So it's also importantly to note a big buff for Siege, because Siege plays a Battering Ram, and then it's going to play a Warfare card, which is going to reduce the cooldown of your Battering Ram inherently on its own. And that's the other thing to consider, is the fact that Siege is playing a Warfare card is also just a big buff to all your things like your Foltest Pride, your anything that has resupply, because that's going to reduce the cooldown on each of them. Also to Henselt as well, because whenever cards adjacent to Henselt reduce their cooldown, he's going to get a point for that. So every time you play a warfare card, if you've got 2 cooldown cards or 2 resupply cards to the left and to the right of Henselt, that's an extra 2 points on him per resupplier. So these warfare cards are looking fantastic, like a big improvement. We've also got more buffs. That's right, more buffs to this warfare archetype. Ballista has had its ability changed to be given resupply as well. So this has a cooldown of 3 on the Ballista, which came in recently. So yeah, another nice buff. The Frigate, which has used to be a staple Northern Realms card, it's been a very long time since it's really been seen any competitive player, has also had its ability change, and it's also got resupply. So if you you could click it and then play a warfare card and then click it again in the very same turn, which is pretty exciting. So Frigate for Swarm Northern Realms, potentially. That's a nice buff as well. Definitely excited for so many of these changes. Reinforced Ballista has basically just been reworded, so it's working the same, but its resupply before was like quite unique, right? That it was every time you play a warfare card, it would reduce the cooldown, but that's just what resupply does across the board now. Riven Pikeman has had its ability changed to, let's have a look at the old Pikeman, shall we? Because I know a lot of us are not going to know what the card does, myself included. At the moment, it's damaging an enemy unit by 2 and resupply boosts off by 1. Now, it's damaging an enemy unit by 2, and Death Blow is going to reduce cooldown of all units on this row by 1. Okay. Riven Pikeman, hello. So it doesn't have Zeal, important to note on the Pikeman. It's a 4 power card for 5 provisions. But if you can damage an enemy by 2, you can reduce, in theory, up to 8 cooldown cards. Of course, that's quite unlikely. It is also a soldier as well, so it's going to give you a crew pocket. You're probably looking at reducing the cooldown of 4 cards on a very good day, maybe 5 if you're lucky. If you could do that, that could be a lot of points, especially if you've got Henselt on the row. That's extra points on 2 extra points on Henselt as well. So I don't think this card is great, but it's interesting for sure. It's also got an inspired ability to always trigger the Death Blow. Siege Ladder has basically been given a Zeal instead of a deploy, which is nice to see. I don't think this card has resupply or anything like that, but it is a cheap 4 provision card. It does have crew of boosting by 2, right? The siege ladder, definitely a nice buff, mate, to just give it an order, because that's also a point on Trollolol as well, right? Like if you're playing 2 of these, more likely to just be playing 1. That is a point on Trollolol. And this card is kind of nice in stockpile decks to get rid of some of the volunteers that you spawn in the row with the stockpile leader ability, which can really overswarm your row. So definitely a nice card in certain decks. I know that saw a lot of playing commando decks. Give it in an order can only be a nice thing. So Siege Master's also got a buff. Its power's changed from 3 to 2. This is one of the most exciting ones in my opinion. So Siege Master is this geezer down here, which never sees play, and its armor has changed from 1 to 0, so no armor, and it's 2 power, and its abilities change. You get this, guys. When you play Siege Engine, summon self from your hand to the right of it, then draw a card. So let's say hypothetically I play a Foltest Pride. Cool. Play my Foltest Pride and I have this little Siege Master geezer in hand. My Siege Master is going to fly out of my hand to the right of Foltest Pride, and that is also then going to allow me to draw a card. So it's a deck cycling, almost like a consistency card for Northern Realms. Like it's thinning your deck by 1. It's 2 power. It's 2 power, 3 points. And it's also contributing to a crew. Now, I think the way this would work is if you have a soldier to the left of Foltest Pride, and then you to play Foltest Pride to the right of the soldier. So basically, let's just say you've got 1 soldier in the melee row on its own, and you're to then play the Siege Engine next to the soldier. The Siege Master is going to fly out to the right, giving you an instant crew pocket, I believe. So that's really, really exciting. I'm so excited to use this card and see how it performs. Finally, the Siege Tower. I think this is a really big change as well. Its ability has changed to Zeal Order, gain 2 Vitality. So let's just take a quick look at the Siege Tower as well while we're here. It is a 4 power, 5 provision card. At the moment on deploy, it gains Vitality for 4 turns and then crew boosts self by 4. So it's an 8 for 5 basically. Whereas now, it has a Zeal Order, gain 2 Vitality. So it's just going to be a 6 for 5 to begin with. But then it has a cooldown of 2. Now, it's also got the crew ability, so you could, rather than give it vitality, you could just boost it. So then if it's crewed every 2 turns, it is going to boost itself by 2 more points. So just getting that cooldown of 2 is really, really important. It doesn't have resupply to note on this card, but yeah, it's just an engine, basically 1 point per turn on the Siege Tower. Very, very excited for these Northern Realms changes. Certainly going to be probably the first deck I dive into. In fact, tomorrow morning I am going to have a bunch of decks that I'm going to build today on the stream. and this is going to be one of the decks that I will just already have for you on day one. Before I even play any games with it, I'll just build a nice looking siege deck, and I think Siege Tower will be in it. We've got to try and include at least one of each of the new cards, but two of these Siege Masters as well, because I'm excited for those. Okay, up next we've still got Syndicate, we've got Nilfgaard, no monster changes, we've got Squirtle. Now, just a quick note, I know I'm quite far into this video, thanks for watching so far, I really do appreciate it. I do like this approach from CDPR to push a bunch of changes for one specific archetype at a time. We've seen a few changes directed at the self-wound archetype. We've seen a whole bunch of changes here aimed at the siege archetype, and then we haven't seen monsters touched. Similarly, last month, I think we saw no changes to Squirtle, was it? Which, while that's a little bit disappointing at the time, I think them really focusing on these specific archetypes is great. We've seen vampires, we've seen Death Wish recently. I think it's a really, really nice direction to go deeper rather than wider, like really just hone in these changes and try and get some more competitive archetypes, because Northern Realms for me at the moment is my least favorite faction. I'm called Temerian Specimen in game because it's my favorite faction, but it's the one I enjoy playing the least at the moment. I'm hoping these siege changes will change that very much. Anyway, moving on to Squirtle, we've got some really exciting ones. We have got, now in fact, I did suggest sort of like at least a buff to one of these cards, and CDPR actually listened, which is pretty damn cool, so big shout out to them. One of the changes in the Squirtle pool is something that I did suggest to them, so yeah, pretty cool. Etriel Maluga, let's have a quick look at these guys. I hope that you guys are enjoying where I'm actually pulling the cards up. I hope that's helpful, and let me know if you want me to do this in future. Basically at the moment they're 4 power, 8 provisions. Etriel damages unit by 3, damage enemy by 3, damage enemy by 3, so both of them just have the same. But if you control the other, Etriel, if you control Maluga, damages something by 7, and Maluga, if you control Etriel, damages adjacent units by 3, so it's going to deal 3 damage to 3 things, and Maluga damages 7 to 1 thing. So these cards have gone from 8 to 6 provisions. Very excited to try these out. I'm going to build a deck with these for sure. Francesca is one I'm really excited for. She has had her counter reduced to 2. So Francesca, I tried playing Francesca this week and she just felt really bad. But with a counter of 2, she's significantly better. So interesting as well, Scorch with its change in initiative the previous month. You can actually double Scorch with Francesca now. Of course, she can Scorch herself, but you know, if your opponent's got a card at 12 and a few at 11, you can double Scorch, which is reminiscent of Villain Tretema from Beta, if any of you guys remember what that card used to do. It used to Scorch the 2 tallest units, basically, but it couldn't Scorch itself. Fran can. There's some other really cool things you can do with Fran, though, like double Heatwave, double Muzzle is another one. Mandrake, by the way, guys, it is something that sounds a little bit memey, but kind of funny. You could play a Neuromancy into Mandrake with Fran, and then you would get another Mandrake. Can you infinitely Mandrake her? I don't know. My head hurts. Let me know in the comments. Next one is the one I suggested, which is Salve. Its counter has changed from 3 to 2. So I just said that this card, it's a spell, right? And it's in Squirtle. Let's have a quick look. Ah, that hasn't worked. Man, this card is hard to spell. Here we go. So I actually said this card could just get a little bit of a buff, because a lot of the best Squirtle decks are spell decks. They play Alza. They can sometimes be a little bit short on spells. It's not really a card you want to go Neuromancy for, but I thought maybe a provision reduction. But I think what CDPR have done, which I actually much prefer, is this, you know, a really cool idea, is they've just reduced its counter from 3 to 2. So basically when it's in the graveyard, so it's actually the opposite one, right? While in your graveyard, remove a counter whenever you play a special card. When counter reaches 0, summon self from the graveyard. So let's say you play this card in round 1. Before, you would need to play 3 more spells to get the 3 points. Now you just need to play 2 more spells. So really, really easy, or a lot easier anyway, to get value out of this into all 3 rounds, because it is comparable to a card like Maddock, where you can use it in round 1, play it in round 1, summon it. It can play for basically 8 points in round 1, right? You get the 5 points, and then you can summon it from your graveyard for 3 more. So that's 8 points. You can play 2 specials now in round 2. That's 3 more points, and then you can play 2 specials in round 3 for 3 more points. Also, it's a spell, so it works with Alza. It's carryover. It gives you a body for your orbs as well, which is quite cool, because a lot of the time your orbs can just go to Dwarf Alza. So really cool to see this card buff. Will it see any competitive play? I don't think it's a million miles away. I really don't. So excited to see it. You can also do double Salve with Fran as well, just something to bear in mind. Not the most powerful combo, but something you can certainly consider doing. Finally, Great Oak got a double buff, which is really exciting. It's now 9 power, 12 provisions. Great Oak is a really nice top-end card to put into your Square Tail decks, particularly because it's synergy with Saskia. Saskia's putting a lot of units onto one row, so I do think Great Oak is a real consideration. Yeah, pretty excited to see that in action. Up next, no monster changes. We've still got Nilfgaard and we've still got Syndicate. I'm actually going to do Syndicate next and then go to Nilfgaard to just keep the suspense going because there's not that many for Syndicate. So Jackpot is now 12 provisions, thank God. Probably could have honestly changed even more, like gone down to 11, but happy to see it nerfed. Off the Books has also had a big buff in that it's now 15 provisions, so lost a provision, but it's gained 2 coins. So while that doesn't sound like a huge buff, the charge does give you like quite a little bit of extra flexibility. So not a huge buff, but obviously with Jackpot getting nerfed as well, Off the Books more of a consideration with this buff. King of Beggars, thank God, has got nerfed. It's lost 2 points. This card is still probably auto-include though, to be honest. That's how bonkers King of Beggars is. So it's now 13 points, 1 provision, and it gives you, what, 12 coins? I think the card's still going to be auto-include for every single Syndicate deck, to be completely honest, but we'll have to wait and see. There's also a bunch of these, but I'm not gonna bother looking at these. I did just see that Henselt is fixed. I know there was a little bit of a bug with him. With Stockpile, which is kind of why I avoided playing him towards the end of the season. But anyway, Nilfgaard, last but not least. Emir got buffed to 10 provisions. He is an aristocrat as well, so maybe some Masquerade Ball shenanigans. Philippe has got something very, very interesting. A lot to unpack with this one. Let's have a quick look at... Oh, Philippe, where are you, bruv? Here he is. This is Philippe. Only really ever play this card in draft mode, but his power is now 6, so he's 6 power, 8 provisions, and his ability is now deploy. If you control a vampire, gain Zeal, Order, give Doomed to an enemy unit. If it already has a status, lock it instead. If it already has more than one status, poison it instead, and it has a cooldown of 1. So this card could give Doomed to cards every turn basically, but if it's already got a status, you can get a lock every turn and potentially even a poison every turn as well. So quite a scary card. It's like a scary engine. 6 points does mean it's quite difficult to remove, so it's like a status Nilfgaard attempt. Is this card good? Listen, I think this looks super scary at first. I don't think it's fantastic though, but you could certainly see it becoming quite good if there's more ways of giving statuses. Obviously, is spying a status? I'm not sure. If you can give something spying, then you could lock it and then poison it. But it's definitely an interesting card in a different direction. Maybe just like a view of like some sort of archetype that CDPR want to push down the line. Very, very excited to try this card out. Also interesting for draft mode as well, with bleeding. Bleeding is a status, right? So if something's got bleeding, Philippe could then lock it and then poison it. So definitely a nice change for draft mode as well. Swears has had its power change from 3 to 4. That's a nice buff for Swears, because obviously it's always been a little bit worse than Amnesty. But now certainly in non-devotion decks looks better. Vatia, okay. He works exactly the same, except before you would have to have spying on a card, right? But now... Wait. Okay, let me work this out. Vatia's ability to change to lock an enemy unit order. But if it's Conspiracy, sees it instead. Wait. Conspiracy is if it's got spying, right? So it's now locking an enemy unit, and if it's got spying, you seize it instead. So if something's locked, before it was if it was locked, you seize it. Now it has to be spying to seize it, but if it doesn't, you can lock it. So I mean, it's easier to give spying to something than it is to lock something, I suppose. Interesting. I don't think this card's much better than it was anyway, to be fair, but definitely a buff, I would say. Obviously it's certainly got a lower floor with the fact that if you don't seize anything, you're just going to lock something. It's kind of interesting. No one ever really played Vatia with Imposter, right? You would think that would be like actually not even that bad, but no one ever was. Definitely interested to try this one out. Mangonel has had its ability change. Whenever an enemy unit gains spying, damage adjacent units to it by 1. I don't think this card is particularly good either, still. His Mangonel, it's 3 power, 5 provisions. So whenever a enemy unit gains spying, this card is so bad, like in its current form. They damage adjacent units to it by 1. But it's just like an order, right? It doesn't have a deploy. So you're playing a 3-point card for 5 provisions. It just seems really trash. For sure. No, don't see this being good at all. And finally, the last change, Van Morlehen's Servant. What the hell is that? Van Morlehen's Servant is a 4 for 4. And copy all statuses from an enemy unit to another enemy unit. Boost self by the number of statuses copied. Bruh. So you can actually move Defender from Cave Troll, right? And Veil from Cave Troll to a card in the back row, perhaps. And then you could poison and lock the front row. So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of like a Purify in a weird sort of way, right? Okay. Some synergy with Imposter as well. Like you could move all the statuses from the front row to the back row, and then you could Imposter and get all the boosts. Wow. Very exciting set of Nilfgaard cards with the Van Morlehen Servant and also Philippe Van Morlehem as well. The Mangonel change seems pretty bad. The Vatia change is nice. I also like to see Emir change. But overall, I love this patch, man. I think it's really, really interesting. I'm a little bit worried about how good this Northern Realms deck is going to be. Hopefully it's not OP. But to be fair, anything that stops people playing Patience cards can only be a big fat W, in my opinion. That's my review of the patch notes, guys. Again, I'm going to be posting a video tomorrow morning talking about 5 decks, I guess, or 6, 1 for each faction. There is 6 factions, right? Yeah, there's 6 factions. I'll post a deck for each faction, what I think is maybe going to be the best deck. But obviously then as I test more decks, we will see exactly what is there. So make sure you come watch my stream on Twitch tomorrow as well if you've watched this one and you don't already follow me over there. Thanks so much for watching the video, guys. If you watched this far, the secret word is... I'm going to go for... The secret word is... I'm going to say Dandelion because I'm confident, mate. It's the season of love. I made this prediction many, many weeks ago. Sticking to my guns. Come on. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you like the video if you haven't done so already, and thank you. See you tomorrow for Gwent Patch Day. Deuces.